I have two of these BESTARC plasma cutters. Now I purchased both of these plasma cutters with my own money. So I have the 50 amp model, which is the BTC500, and the 65 amp model, which is the 650. Both of these machines are pilot arc, which means you can take the plasma cutter and start in the middle of a piece of steel, which I would highly recommend. It'd be a huge hassle if you couldn't be able to do that, had to start at the edge. Now I've done a pretty in-depth video about this 50 amp machine, and I will link that in the description if you're interested. But mostly we're going to focus on this new 65 amp machine here. So you can purchase these off of Amazon. Right now this one's currently about $250 and the 65 amp is about $350. I've had this 50 amp machine for quite a while and it has been flawless. Very impressed with it. That's why I'm sticking with the same brand on this new one. But I needed a machine at work for some light fabrication, so taking this one to work, upgrading the shop one. So let's have a look at it. So the max cutting thickness that is advertised for the 50 amp machine is 12 millimeters, or basically a ½ inch. And on this 65 amp machine, the advertised cutting thickness is 16 millimeters, or basically 5/8. Something rather annoying about both of these tools is the switch is on the back. And there's your air inlet there. So we got our amps. I usually have this set at the max. I found that even if you're cutting, say, thinner steel, if you just up your speed of your cutting and still keep the amps up and the air pressure up, seems to cut best that way. But I like this knob setup, very simple. So this is the post time. So after you let off of the trigger of the plasma torch, air will keep flowing for a set amount of time, and this is the amount of time that you are setting that to, and that's just to cool that tip off after cutting hot metal. And here's your regulator. Both these tools have the exact same torch and chintzy clamp. Now, this is something that they could have sent you with a better one, but that's alright. You can buy these cheap enough. But if you have a look at my old one, it's seen some better days. It's about time to replace it. Okay, 65 amp machine. Got a little bit of a different switch here, still on the back. Pretty nice LED display here. So at first glance you would think a fancy display like this would be an advantage, but actually in my opinion, I think the simplest is the best, easiest to use, and likely long-term most reliable. This is very easy to change both the settings. This is a little bit of a hassle. That interface is pretty to look at, but can't say I care that much for it. And this EO5 code just means that there's no air pressure. Kind of alarming when anytime you see a fault code you think, oh no. So I got my air regulator set to 65 psi, and there's the post time and the pilot arc time. That's how many seconds it's gonna keep spewing air there. Now you can adjust the regulator for different thickness cuts. There's a little sheet here that tells you, can't quite catch it on camera, tells you what the regulator air pressure should be set at for whatever thickness cuts. But in reality, you kind of just need to pick one air pressure that's maybe a little bit in between and just adjust your amperage. So this has a setting for if you want the torch to operate like normal, where when you're pushing on the trigger, cutting, letting off, stops cutting, or this here, you push on the trigger, starts cutting, let off, still cutting, push on the trigger again, then let off, and the torch will stop cutting. Both these tools take the same consumables, and these are cheap and readily available. I'll post a link to the consumables off of Amazon. I'm going to go ahead and throw some new ones in this torch head. I mostly cut rusty, painted, nasty metal, so you're gonna go through more consumables if that's the kind of metal work you do. But that's okay, they're cheap enough. Now I've noticed after a few hours of usage, these parts will tend to come loose, so I've been putting just a little bit of pressure on them with some pliers just to kind of help them. So I happen to have some 11mm plate. Let's try cutting it with that 50 amper. What, cut that? No problem. Now there is some skill involved in actually using a plasma cutter and cutting a straight line. Usually I put a guide or something on there, but yeah, that ain't too bad. I got some of this 5/8 steel here. Now this 50 amp plasma cutter isn't rated to cut this, but let's give it a try anyways. Well, it's pretty nasty, but it did make it through to the other side. Definitely not the best tool for this, but you could cut it from both sides and it would make pretty quick work of it. All right, let's try some quarter. Not too bad. So the 50 amp BESTARC plasma cutter is very capable. Let's see how the 65 amper does. As we look at our swanky display, I'm running both machines between 60 and 65 PSI, and I'm maxing this one out at 65 amps. So this will be the first cut with this machine. Let's see if it even works. So got some of this 5/8 to christen the new plasma cutter. Now this new one comes with the standoff. Now this helps you have your proper clearance as you're cutting, because you're not supposed to really put this tip directly on the metal, but I've noticed these things don't tend to last very long, so I just kind of run without it and do my best to keep the height correct. This new one came with this little safety guy here, and I think I ripped the old one. I think I ripped this off of my old one on purpose because this is rather annoying. So looking at the cut, you can tell that it blasted through a lot better. So they aren't lying, it can cut 5/8. It'll just be a nasty cut is all. Let's try some of that. 12 mil. No problem at all. And quarters. Alright, let's try cutting it a little quicker and see how it does. I'm going to demonstrate that pilot arc, and that's the ability to blast a hole in the metal without having to come in from the side. So it helps if you start the torch a little bit crooked and then come in. No problem at all. So both of these machines are extremely capable considering the money. Now, is it worth really spending an extra $100 for the 65 amp? My opinion would be not really. And I think for pretty much everyone, this smaller one is more than capable. I hope you guys like this video. I hope this sheds some light on these cheap plasma cutters off of Amazon. Now I'll post the links to both these down in the description, and I'll also post a link to the consumables. Alright, we'll catch you guys next time.
Keep thinking.